Now, coming to tonight's session, please allow me to welcome Mr. Sai Satish Vedam, the host of this session. Sai Satish is a product leader with extensive hands-on experience in building and bringing disruptive technology products to the market. He has worn many hats during his career, all the way from a programmer, designer, architect, analyst, manager to a chief strategist for global products in large corporations. He was most recently the Senior Director of Product Management Oracle. He is also an executive coach, senior faculty at the Institute of Product Leadership. A very warm welcome to you, Sai. Handing the session over to you now.
Thank you, Shama. Good evening, all of you, and good evening, Ranga. Good to see you.
Good evening.
And I see folks still streaming in. I know 8 p.m. on a working day on a Monday is a little challenge, wading through the Bangalore traffic. We have yet another wet evening in the Bangalore. And for those of you who are here, we know how Bangalore behaves when it rains, right? So I think it's also, a lot of people are getting back to offices and work. So for those of you who have joined, welcome to another edition 2022, starting with the product storytelling. So just a quick recap of some of the housekeeping things that Shama mentioned before I introduce our speaker today. The event is streamed live on multiple platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So feel free to ask your questions on any of those channels. And for those of you who are in Zoom, joining on Zoom, ask your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. The chat can get pretty cluttered. So the Q&A is where I'll be monitoring. And of course, we'll bring in all the questions that you're asking on other channels too. And as we go through the conversation, so this is a fireside chat, if you will, a conversation between our guest speaker today and myself on this very interesting topic. As we go through that, I'll certainly pick some of the most relevant and common questions that we see, and we bring that into the conversation. And as Shama mentioned, for the best question, at least adjudged by the speaker today, you have a free digital learning course that you can go ahead and learn. Right? Super. So with that, let me introduce to all of you today's speaker, Renganathan Padmanabhan, and popularly called as Renga. Am I right? Ranga, should we call you Renga?
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Excellent. So Ranga is a product and design leader in the digital space with lots of experience in it. He has actually built product and design teams in Deloitte Digital and Nike right from the scratch, from the ground up. He has immense experience in hiring teams, grooming talent, and leading product and design and engineering teams in various organizations. Renga also writes extensively on product and design topics, and of course, we'll hear more from him about his journey on how he is now focusing more on product storytelling. And he's also a mentor at a few institutions, including Career Foundry and Pluralsight. So Ranga, before we jump into it, you sharing your journey, and then we start off the conversation. I thought we will understand a little bit about our audience today, right? So that way we can focus on what is most relevant for majority of the audience and spend more time on that. So with that, I'd like to launch a quick poll, if you will, right? About 3 to 4 questions, just to help us understand who the audience is, where they are joining us from. So please go ahead and launch that poll, Shama, if you can. Great. So the question that you see, and for folks who are joining through other channels, you may not be able to take up this poll, but for the folks on Zoom, please go ahead and indicate your choice there. You're currently in what role? Are you currently in product management or product strategy roles, growth marketing, product marketing, areas focusing on demand generation, customer acquisition activities, or are you coming from engineering background? Lots of folks that we have seen in the past editions come from delivery and consulting backgrounds as well. And of course, there are many other interested participants here, I'm sure, whose role doesn't fit here, so please select other. Right, so go ahead, and this is also kind of a warm-up. For many of you who are slouching on your couch and watching through a mobile phone, do take a little bit and indicate your preference here, right, with your choice. Okay, good. So can we move to the, okay, so here is the results. Looks like lots of them from product management and product strategy, very few from marketing and to growth marketing, which is kind of interesting given that the topic that we are more focusing on is on storytelling for products, especially outbound, right? Talking to the market. And that's good. At least the product management folks are quite interested. So let's bring up the next one. Okay, so are you joining us right out of college, or 5 to 10 years work experience, or 10 plus work experience in the industry? Okay, super. Can we see? I'm actually curious about this too. There you go. Unsurprising for all our festivals that we have seen. I'm waiting for a day where this will turn the other way around. But absolutely welcome, folks. I think the more questions that you bring in, the more interactivity you bring in. We all can benefit from this. Thank you. How about the third one? Let's see where you are from now. Where are you joining? If you're joining from any of these metros or outside India, right? It's a global festival, as Shama said, although the timing is not very conducive for several geographies outside India, but please go ahead and indicate where you're coming from.
On a personal note, I'm crushed that Mumbai is not on the list. So.
Mumbai is not on. That's a mistake that I think the team did. Our speaker is from Mumbai. Yeah, I know. Right. So, okay, great. Let's see the results. Bangalore, and then followed by Delhi, Hyderabad. Okay, other. Well, thank you. And one last thing relevant to the theme of the festival, right? So, because there's been a lot of back and forth among many people that you see, what is product storytelling, right? And choose. This is looks like this is a multiple choice, multiple options. So indicate whatever comes to your mind. The phrase when you hear product storytelling. I like the last one though. The thing that you do when you don't know what to do. Okay. So let's see what our audience has indicated. Okay, 29% folks say that the thing that you do when you don't know what to do, which we hope to change the perception today with and this rest of this festival. And thank you everyone for indicating that. So Renga, you have a sense of our audience now, and as we go through this discussion, we can spend more time on certain areas that you feel are more relevant, right? Sure. But I'd love to hear more about you, your journey, where you are, and what you are spending most of your time now on. So sure. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. And if you wouldn't mind, I'll just share one slider about my professional experience in a nutshell. Absolutely. So that people could ask questions that I know I can answer for sure. If not, I will at least point you to the right place too.
Certainly.
Let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully this comes down. Perfect. So my name is Renga. It's short for Renganathan Padmanabhan. In case you missed the last statement, that's my full name. So for the sake of clarity for the rest of the session, please call me Ranga. I have been in tech for 17 years now and spent time in multiple roles, just like every one of you who answered is in a product management role. I have had my own unique path to product management until I became a self-employed consultant in my own agency. I started out as an ERP architect for the first 8 years of my career. got bored building large scale and breaking most of the large scale ERP systems, but building most of the time. I got a chance to pivot into doing project management for one of the biggest digital agencies in the world, which is Deloitte Digital, and slowly pivoted into what is now formally known as product management. But back then, I did not know you called it that. Took a break for building my own entrepreneurial venture with my wife, who's a fashion designer. We were building our own apparel platform for bespoke clothing for women. Don't ask me why she didn't consider men as part of the repertoire, but we'll come to that later. But we unfortunately launched right in the middle of COVID. And as you all would acknowledge, people were happy to be in their pajamas. Nobody was buying any new attire. So we pivoted quite a bit. We did not get the right product market fit. So I decided if I'm going to bury my dreams of building my own apparel platform, I might as well do it for the best apparel brand in the world. So I joined Nike, and I was given the fortunate role of growing their data product org in India. I grew that in the span of a year, and I quit Nike in December, this time to fully focus on being a self-employed consultant at the intersection of product marketing, and content marketing. I don't know what that role is called yet, but as Steve Jobs says, you cannot, map your path actually going forward. You can always see backwards and see, okay, this is what I meant to be. So I will eventually find a good name for what is known as that right skill, which happens at that intersection. The skills I've picked up over the years, I'm by no means an expert on any of these skills, but I can share what I know, and hopefully that sets you right on your journey to whatever skill you're looking to upskill on, whether it's product management, product marketing, customer research, user experience, so on and so forth. Since we are here, and I have at least, the numbers increased to 77. Thank you so much for joining in the sounding numbers. I'm happy to talk about not just these four areas, but also my unique path, which I've used to develop into this particular role. I'm happy to share my own anecdotes and insights, and hopefully that inspires you to get better at any of these skills and build your own unique role too. Yeah. That's me in a nutshell. I want to open it up for questions and open it up for a conversation with Sai. And let's see how this unfolds. And I'm happy to take questions as they come along. So feel free to interrupt us at any point in time to keep the conversation flowing. Over to you, Sai.
Awesome. Well, that was very humble of you. Very diverse background and accomplished career so far. Thank you for joining, Ranga. I think so. Let's jump in, and I think looks like there are about 50 plus folks watching live on LinkedIn too. So we do have several folks from other streams as well.
Awesome.
Right? And again, folks, strongly encourage you to keep your questions coming as we go through the conversation. And we'll pause at different times, or at least at the end, and pick some of these questions. So, Ranga, directly jumping into the theme of this festival and the specific topic, the secret sauce to fabricating product stories, right? And especially around positioning and messaging. Now, often when we talk about product storytelling in the context of communicating the value that your product is creating to the market, right? So we often hear those two words, right? Especially from people who know what it is, from people who don't know what it is, right? The messaging and positioning, or positioning and messaging. And often, unfortunately, is used interchangeably by some folks, right? And whereas completely different aspects of it. So maybe we should start, peeling them out a little bit, if you will.
Sure.
Right? How do you see positioning as? What is the activity that happens as part of the position?
Sure. So again, the textbook definition is people would say positioning is how you probably try to see and position yourself uniquely in the market so that people notice you for the product and the unique value it offers. Now, that's the textbook definition, but you're not here for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The unique part I would play is there's going to be so much latent demand for whatever anybody's trying to build at any point in time that it's going to be arrogant of you or any organization to think that they're going to capture 100% of the latent market share that is available, right? So you talk about total addressable market, serviceable market, everything, but you only end up capturing a very narrow sliver of it, right?
Yeah.
So positioning helps you go after a very small portion of it, knowing fully well that there is a sliver of that market which would like you for that specific mix of skills or services or goods that you offer. And it could be nothing to do with the product, it could be to do with excellent customer service. And I will come to that in a bit, because that ended up becoming the unique proposition for one of the clients I'm advising right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do position yourself as having a unique blend of what the product offers, but not just that, but also what the organization offers in return for you trying to invest time and money into the product. But messaging takes it a bit further. You have decided, okay, you're going to go after this very tiny sliver of
So
set of customers.
before we
Sure.
jump into the messaging part, right? I think I want to kind of summarize and also bring in more clarity for folks so that when they go away, that confusion at least is not there anymore, right? So one is, I think you're saying positioning is, it defines essentially where your product or service fits in the marketplace, right? And defines your key customer segments and also who is buying or who's choosing your product. And I believe positioning is also a very strategic exercise, right? And mostly done, it's an internal focused activity first. It is done before that leads to the other activities that now you take it to the market. So is it fair to say that positioning is often done, that activity, and often people talk about a positioning document, right? Which kind of synthesizes and brings that clarity for the other teams that you interlock with, right? Especially if you're a product manager, you're very closely interlocking with the product marketing manager on that part of it, right? So, what's your view on when it is done? Is it usually done before the messaging activity or tactics that are employed? Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely. So it's fair to say that positioning is not a one and done activity. You typically tend to do it very early when you are deciding to build an audience for yourself and the services and the products that you offer. But you also refine it as soon as you start hearing feedback for what your customers eventually bought you for. Right now, you might say, okay, so for example, one of my clients whom I advise and execute marketing strategy for is a no-code workflow automation platform, and they actually automate end-to-end customer journeys, right? But customer journeys is not a term that people understand and truly connect with.
Yeah.
So we felt, okay, what it truly waters down to the way people would understand it who have no knowledge about the company is I automate workflows. So we said, okay, let's go ahead with going to automate enterprise workflows, but to truly large enterprises who are dealing with huge transaction volumes, huge customer volumes, and let's go after that. And when you do connect with your customers about this particular positioning that you're pitching the product with, you would also need to counter with the fact that customers might tell you, you know what, I actually bought you for thinking that you actually cater really well to small and medium scale businesses because you offer such great customer service, because nobody helps us out because we are a small shop. People don't give us the kind of white glove service that we are used to with you. So we actually ended up buying you, not knowing that you are actually buying or catering to an enterprise workflow business. So it's very important that you go out to the point of view that, hey, this is what I'm going to position myself with. But I would also want to make sure that it's not a one-sided process. You also take into account what customers are truly buying you for.
So you're saying as you do the internal exercise on prioritizing or identifying the customer segment that you want to position the products to, and what are the key aspects that you're going to highlight and emphasize to them, you're saying you're also going to be open to the feedback that comes back, obviously, and saying, is this really right? Is this resonating? Now, obviously, the delivery mechanism or the mechanism that you communicate that positioning or the value that you're doing is now using the messaging techniques, right?
Correct.
And messaging is typically written with an external audience in mind, right? And in your case, in the example that you talked about, that particular product, the workflow which manages or maps end-to-end customer journeys, help us understand with some examples of what messaging techniques or tactics you've taken to communicate that value of that product.
Sure. So taking pertinently the example that I just talked about, when we go about pitching these product to folks in the Indian or the Asia Pacific region, it's traditionally a sales driven motion. It's hardly inbound, where people come to the website, know about us, decide, okay, this product seems worth my fit and worth my needs, so I'm going to actually engage in a call. So they click the contact us button, schedule a demo, and then we get into the sales process. In the Indian and Asia Pacific region, we have typically gone after clients knowing that this is the ideal set of customers we would like to pitch into. And we have sold them on the fact that we do end-to-end customer journey automation. Now, when the website came into fruition and that brand refresh happened, they saw that we actually talk about automating enterprise workflows. And they said, hey, by the way, we like the pitch that you talked about in automating end-to-end customer journeys. Why are you talking about this? And we learned that, okay, depending on the maturity of the customer, depending on the market our customer is in, they might understand the proposition we are selling to them differently, right? And they say, okay, we have seen other workflow automation providers, but they don't offer the end-to-end capability that you do. So could you help us understand why is this disconnect? So as we speak, we are actually revising our message to actually make sure that we are not just alienating the customers who were sold into the positioning that we were an end-to-end customer journey automation platform, but also the ones who probably don't even understand what customer journey means. But we are trying to make sure that we create compelling product stories or compelling platform stories to educate them on what a customer journey is and how can you automate it. So education and telling stories, I'm sorry to shamelessly plug the topic of our chat here, but has to do a lot with making sure that you also tweak your positioning to the people who have already employed your product, but also to the folks who are looking to buy from you for the next set of customers. So it's always going to be an uneasy tango between the ones who knew the proposition before you started putting the messaging out there and the ones who are yet to experience it. So which is the reason I come back to the earlier point. It's hardly a one and done notion. You might want to make sure that you're constantly tweaking your proposition, not just on your website, but also in every conversation you have with a prospect. And hopefully that answers your question. I know it was a long-wound one.
No, absolutely. I think, you're saying there is always going to be a balancing act that you will have to do for people who purchase or hired your product based on what they perceive as the value as, because that's how they understood that. And now,
they realized it too.
And they realized, of course, otherwise they wouldn't be, I'm sure they would walk away, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, actually, I remember an interesting quote that one of the folks that I was having a conversation on a long time ago said, messaging is essentially an expression of the positioning, right? The way that you express through various mediums, various mechanisms, is how you are now reaching your customers and they understanding what you stand for, what value your product offers, and what you as an organization stands for as well, right? And so when we talk about messaging, right? I mean, this is a tricky thing for especially product managers, right? And most often they take the view that it's not my responsibility; it's the marketing team, right? So they are supposed to be doing this messaging, which I think in many organizations that is true. So what are the testing mechanisms that we can use to check which of these messages are resonating well, right? I'm sure there are some qualitative methods and quantitative methods as well. But what have you used in your career journey with Nike, with this current engagement that you are in, that you found to be effective?
Sure. So the way we have typically always try to tweak our messaging once we have set out with, okay, this is the enterprise workflow automation market that I've decided to pursue, right? And this is how I'll put out a messaging, not just on our website, not on our emails, but also with every conversation I have with my prospect. Now, that's well said, but it doesn't translate to well done because there's always going to be a gap in translation, right? So what we end up doing is make sure that whenever we have gone from a totally sales driven motion to an inbound marketing system where people experience our website before they jump into a call with us, we generally ask them, could you go to the website, you could read all about our products, and by the way, do you feel it resonates with you, right? And they typically started out with saying, hey, I heard you, I was fully convinced of your value proposition, but your website talks about something else. Could you tell us what this is about? We have hardly had a lot of churn in our prospects because of that, because we had already shown what the platform is, because we had shown off the product, what it could do, the benefits, etc. It's just that the messaging probably did not translate well. It's like crudely speaking, you're saying that I'm going to call you later, but I ended up texting you, right? So the way you probably end up communicating the message is going to be very radically different from what people expect you to. So what we end up doing is mix both quantitative and qualitative methods. When I say qualitative, it is typically about did what you experienced in the sales pitch or did what you experienced in the demo call resonate with what you actually came to us with, the original idea with. And it usually translates to putting it out on a platform, testing it out with audiences who are in your buyer intent, but also with every prospect that you actually do it, because you're talking to prospects every day.
Absolutely.
They schedule a call.
Yeah, it could be focus groups or it could be one-on-one qualitative interviews as well, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And these folks are invested in actually collaborating with you as a company and a product. So they are truly in your high intent audience. Now, a lot of companies have come up with making this broadly available, especially if you're starting out as an early stage startup. I don't know if folks in the call have experienced Winter. It's Winter with a Y, WYNTER. It's founded by a guy called P. Playa. He's spelled as PEEPLAJA. He founded the company called CXL. I don't know how many folks have come across CXL. They are the world's biggest, I would say, the most profound agency which teaches scores on conversion optimization. But they have a bunch of different companies which tie together with CXL, like Spiro. Winter is one of them. And I feel Winter has cracked the code of helping people evaluate their messaging really well. All they ask you to do is prepare a landing page, prepare a website, and they ask you who your ideal customer profile is. Is it CIOs? Is it head of data? Is it product marketers? Is it product managers? Are you selling directly to product managers? Then they invite actual product managers who are verified product managers who have years of experience there. They vet their audience really well. And they ask them if this messaging works well. You will also see people do tear downs of messaging almost every week on LinkedIn and Twitter. And you will understand how he does that and how the team actually arrives at popular product companies, but they actually do a detailed breakdown of if their messaging works well or not.
Oh, great.
So I highly recommend teams to do that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that the executive MBA participants do in IPL is they come up with a product idea and they actually need to validate their value proposition, both qualitatively and quantitatively, right? And so such kind of tools and such kind of resources, I'm sure, hopefully there are some who is listening on this session though. But thanks for bringing that up, right?
Yeah, just one last point before we move on, Satish, is you also tend to do that just once, right? People think, oh, I've built a product, let me validate that with my audience if the messaging is on point. But eventually, let's say you're a product company, you eventually build a slew of adjacent products and probably build a portfolio around it, right? Which you try to upsell to a customer, right? At that point in time, you might want to know if the messaging still works, not just for the individual product, but for the portfolio too. At that point in time, it's necessary that you keep reiterating if the testing of the messaging is going on, so that you understand if it still resonates well with your audience. Yeah. So winter is not cheap, but it definitely works well.
Oh, well, when you really are at the cusp of making the decision on, yes, I think this is a problem worth solving. Yes, we believe we have a product that we want to build or an idea that we want to do, and you don't want to, you want to mitigate all the risks upfront. That's when you take these services like Winter. Even though you spend some money, it's important to do that now rather than doing that much later in the game and then burning a lot of things.
Absolutely. I think the money pays for itself in the first prospect too.
Absolutely. So now when it comes to this messaging and various tactics that we use to test, right? What is a good time to do this? Is this often people think that when we have the product ready and we are ready to go to the market, and that's when marketing gets involved and other creative teams that come up with the different types of messaging, different form factors, different formats, and all of that. But what's your thought on when should this ideally start?
I think even before you write a line of code into your product, and very controversial argument, but I wouldn't want to build a product first. I would rather build an audience around the product before the product gets built. So if you're an early stage entrepreneur, if you're just building out your product, but you don't want to invest in hiring a team which actually builds the product painstakingly for you, it would be good for you to invest some time in understanding if there is indeed a latent need to do that. So I'm sure the audience, the product manager audience here understands that, but nobody has actually told them that, hey, you need to build an audience before you build a product, but nobody told them, okay, how do I build an audience? Where is this audience located, right? So places like Winter, places like where you would probably be able to do that. And I guess we should also be talking about the unconventional sources of where your audience lies.
We'd love to touch upon, because a lot of conventional means is talked and dusted numerous times. So let's try and get into some creative ways or unknown ways of doing it, and I'm sure you can bring your perspectives there. But so you're saying that the messaging should start ideally much before you even start building your product. And I like this statement. And by the way, I don't think it used to be controversial about 4 or 5 years ago, that statement. Now there is increased awareness about the risks that you would take when you build a product without having validated the problems with the audience. So so you're saying start early and in a way before launch, way before even developing. So this is before market research or during that time a stage of the product.
Correct. And it also ties in well with the lean ideology. If you're into that, if you want to build a lean startup without expending a lot of money into building a product, I would suggest that you understand where this audience lies. And I did not know that people used to call it a specific term, but we started out early searching for our audience in the most unlikeliest of places, especially Slack communities. And we went about understanding. So for example, our workflow automation platform is on no code. You don't have to write code for even the most complex use cases. And we decided that there's going to be a segment which actually buys it, who's going to be the enterprise buyer. There's also going to be a segment of developers who actively use it and find the need for it and then convince or influence their organization to go buy it. But there's also a segment in middle, I wouldn't call it influencers, but there's a set of huge community moderators who actually encourage people to try out a lot of products, especially in the startup accelerator audience. And especially in the startup accelerator world, you'll find a lot of people are encouraged to try out no code tools before they start building out their own website and React or Laravel or any of
Yeah.
these new modern technologies, right?
Yeah.
So we went after those communities, and we're finding a lot of interest in them wanting to try out our platform. And although I'm not allowed to speak about the platform in public, but this platform has actually helped them solve for two of the huge compelling use cases, which they typically stitch together 3 or 4 platforms together, right? So they use Zapier, or they used Make, or they use any of these other platforms which actually allow you to stitch different ecosystems together.
The integration platforms that you
Correct. And for that matter, any SaaS company is usually a patchwork of different SaaS companies behind the scenes. You use payments for something else, you use fulfillment somewhere else. Right?
I call it the Wizard of Oz model.
Well, yeah, actually, truly put. So we want to make sure that we actually contact these community admins and introduce our tool to them, to ask them to come try out, take it for a spin for a month, knock it out. And if you like it, or if you don't like it, if you could just help us collaborate on a piece that you would want to co-author.
Yeah.
So they get, sorry, go ahead.
No, complete.
No, they get a piece of new technology which they are happy to, keep their hands dirty on and experience that live.
These are
and they also get
customers. Yeah,
absolutely, and they get full support from us to be able to try out and then find out if they have any grievances. It flows back into our product backlog, right? It's good feedback there.
Okay. Now, just quickly summarizing on that, testing early on the messages part, right? I think the message essentially is start testing early, much before you even build a product. It also means, accepting the mistakes that you're going to be making, right? And also when you share this with a small group of people or small group of users, you kind of create a safe space, to be wrong, and to learn and to adapt and to change before you actually take that at a larger scale, right? So that's the advantage that you provide. Super. So now the next stage, if you will, in that journey is, we've heard a lot about sales funnels and marketing funnels, right? And there are some unconventional things that are coming up, at least, and I would love to explore your thoughts on that. What's your thinking on dark funnels, and help us understand what these dark funnels are, especially in the context of customer journey, right? I mean, customer journeys have become extremely complicated, right? And they are no longer linear. I mean, they are never linear, but it's much more complicated now, right from when the need arises and what they start doing, where they stop, and whom they talk to, and then jump back onto this, and finally make a decision on making the product. And often the traditional digital marketing or even marketing approaches have been that it's a funnel. You have the top of the funnel, and there is a need, there is an awareness, need, consideration, and conversion, right? If only the real world was so nicely, curated or modeled. So talk to us about how your experience about dark funnels.
Sure. And dark funnels is
and just to bring in, I think there was a question around the customer journeys. Is the customer journey mapping the same as a process mapping? The short answer is obviously no, but let's hear out what your point of view on customer journeys and where the dark funnels come in.
Sure. So let me clarify the customer journey question first. Customer journey mapping to process mapping. So I would say the process mapping usually is a subset of customer journeys. And let me explain that with a simple example, if it helps. Let's say you want to initiate a home loan, right? And you're talking to somebody over the phone or over a chat conversation with, let's say, ICICI Bank, right? Or any other bank that you might pick in your geography. Once you initiate and give all the required documentation, the credentials that people need to identify you as a customer, you hear from them, we will get back to you. And after that, there's a radio silence on their end. And what happens behind the scenes is somebody is initiating a credit check, somebody's finding out your financial eligibility, somebody is validating the title of the home, everything. So a lot of processes happen behind the scenes So that part, if you automate, even through a process like robotic process automation, is still back office processes, right? But the customer is still wondering, why haven't they replied back? Am I eligible or am I not? Will I get the loan in time? Right. So being able to stitch together a customer facing process transparently with your back office process and back is going to be end-to-end customer journey mapping, which means the customer is always kept in the loop saying your initial credit check is being initiated, your home loan title is validated, and they don't hear crickets until the point that their loan actually gets approved, right? It leads to a lot of credibility and trust building with the customer because they know that something's happening behind the scenes, which gives me confidence that my loan is going to get greenlit. But if you're not able to tie these processes back, and by the way, this is totally usual for most of the banks today, right? You initiate a loan and then you hear crickets and then you keep following up until one fine day, a visit to the bank actually leads you to find out your loan's been approved, right? So there's a lot of work to be done in automating customer facing journeys and back office journeys end to end. And that's where, I'm helping this particular platform build out their messaging and positioning. But to your question, Sai, what has been dark funnels? A lot of people talk about dark funnels in social media, but one of the persons I specifically look up to is Chris Walker from Refine Labs. Chris Walker talks eminently about dark funnels, and for the uninitiated, dark funnels are all the touch points that a customer interacts with your company, which cannot be attributed back to a marketing funnel, right? If somebody visits, clicks an ad on social media, which leads them to your website, that's attributable because somebody clicked through on a Google ad and you came to the site. But if somebody actually met you on a Slack community, heard about you on a podcast, and any of these places which typically does not have any funnel tied to it, these are known as dark funnels because they are not visible to you as to where did they hear about us that actually brought them to the website, right? So want to make sure that people understand that, especially in B2B, with the sales pipeline and the sales cycle being so protracted, if not week, it's months in the journey, you might want to make sure that every single touch point that the customer has is where you're able to make sure your messaging is on point. And we want to make sure that if there are other channels that you're exploring, feel free to go ahead and do that, even if it's not attributable from a spend perspective. If you're building a podcast, talk about your messaging there, let people understand, what is this particular company doing in no code and workflow automation. It might not be tracked back in analytics back to your platform, but it still is reiterating the messaging. So it's totally worth spending that extra effort and money.
The dark funnels, essentially what we are referring to is the blanks that you have, right? The blanks that we are left with when a consumer converts, and we don't know how to attribute or all the attribution points, as you said. And this has existed for a long time, right? I mean, think about the word of mouth, right? Word of mouth works really powerfully in many cases, right? And if I want to purchase a car, I might do a lot of online research, which of course Google is tracking, and the marketeers are, gorging on that data and saying, okay, this is where they started the journey, this is where the website they went in, and from there they came to our website. But hey, in between all of those things, I'm actually talking to my cousin, my friend, and having that conversation, and probably even making up that mind, saying this is what I want to buy, and then jump into the website or go to the dealer. And so there are blanks that you can't attribute the journey to, right? And that's the dark funnels I mean, when I first heard about this, I was thinking, well, that is something spooky. That sounds very spooky, but not necessarily. Now,
but just one thing that I wanted. So the way you participate in any of these methods in the dark funnel or dark channels
Yeah.
is going to be something that you believe, okay, it's happening in a silo, so I don't know how to measure the success back to it, or do I need to keep doing that? You could do that with qualitative methods. If a customer landed on your site and you're unable to trace back through your analytics where they came from, a simple in-app or in-website survey would help you understand where they came from.
Yeah.
Back to the tune of, how did you hear about us, and
Sure.
what is the message that resonated well with you, right?
Yeah.
And that could actually help you understand, hey, they actually heard about us in a podcast,
Yeah.
right? For all you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's going to be far more important. And for especially for folks who are tuned in here, the dark funnels, I believe, are going to become increasingly common, especially due to, the marketeers losing access to the insights about this journey, because, the Apple's app tracking mechanism that is blocked, third-party cookies are now being blocked, untrackable touch points are increasing than before. I mean, there's a huge change, right? So just that one particular capability that iOS built in, which said, ask the app not to track, created, billions of dollars of wealth loss in many companies, right? So I think if you are, for the audience as well, if you're focusing on too much on attribution and probably misattributing the money that is spent because you've missed the dark funnel. And so it's important to identify the ways to actually measure that, like you said, right? Either in a conversation, if you have with a customer, find out how they heard about you. How did they come here? How did they make up their mind? Did any of our messaging help you, or did somebody else convince you, or a survey or a poll or any of those things, right? So I think that's a critical part. Now, any techniques that you can help us and the audience on how we can actually leverage some of these dark funnels?
Sure. So one of the tools which has really helped me in recent times has been Sparktoro, and it's spelled as Sparktoro. And that's a tool which is built by Rand Fishkin, who built Moz, and he then left Moz and then eventually built Sparktoro. So Sparktoro is an audience, intelligence tool. It actually tells you, so it actually tells you where your audience hangs out, right? And well, unsurprising fact, your audience doesn't hang out always on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. They actually listen to your podcast. They actually listen to, or they actually visit specific websites.
Third-party websites.
Third-party websites. And these are going to be, and Sparktoro has this really amazing feature called hidden gems. And hidden gems are ones where you don't find a large portion of the audience hanging out. You find them hang out in tens of thousands, but it's good enough for you to hang out and get real-time information. So Sparktoro is really great for, especially us, and especially me as a solo marketer, to be able to understand where do these audiences lie and how do they talk. So when we talk about messaging, it's very essential to get the lingo right? So for example, if you're talking about data platforms, right? Even in data platforms, the way a data engineer or a data architect in the thick of things who's building out a data pipeline in Airflow or Spark is going to use certain language which you cannot get while listening to LinkedIn or Twitter, right? So to be able to understand where your audience hangs out and the way they talk about it is going to help you understand how to build the content on your web page really well, right? Because they are also going to use the same message in their search intent. They're going to ask, okay, what's the best tool to build a data pipeline today? Maybe it's not Airflow, maybe it's not Spark. So if you are a data pipelining company and you want to be recognized and show up in Google, you might want to pick up on these words that your audience is speaking in.
Got it. Excellent. That's a great advice. So in the interest of time, let's touch one last topic and then get into the Q&As. There are good, interesting questions that are coming up now.
I know it's piling up, so I'm eager to get to that too.
Yeah. And I've been making some notes of some of these questions as well, right? So,
Sure.
Now, one of the things, especially popular and important in enterprise companies is how do you enable the sales teams so that they also speak the same value and the same message and the positioning that is part of your internal positioning, right? And often the product marketing teams, with the help of product management teams, in many cases, build out the sales collaterals, right? So you talk about
Sales enablement decks.
sales enablement decks, right? And you have cheat sheets, you have one pagers, and all kinds of that. Are there any other interesting ways that you have used or you have come across to actually enable the sales team to tell a better story to the customer?
Sure. A lot of flag that product marketing and sales enablement teams usually receive is you're creating collateral that nobody wants to read, right? And very guilty of that. We have all prepared several pieces of fact sheets, cheat sheets, which we find out to our dismay that nobody has actually downloaded, right? A lot of it has, especially when you're building technical products or creating technical content for developer audiences or data audiences, you will see that if they are technical in nature, you would expose them to a product or a demo of the product itself rather than have them go through a PDF, right? So what we have typically used is allow them to use in-house demos. It might contain a very scrubbed, publicly available data set, and we allow to play with them all they want, right? The other parts is, of course, product trials, but people have definitely explored that option. But what has been very, very useful is to create in-house calculators to allow people to understand. Let's say, for example, you're a hosting platform, right? You're using a hosting platform, and let's say you're hosting WordPress, for example. You might want to tell that particular WordPress site admin exactly how much are you going to burn in a year. Right? So using a calculator would actually give them all the data points that they need to fill that out, and also creates a mini discovery process for you that this is how people are going to use it. So let me upskill or sell this product for a better tier, right? You actually find out, okay, you have actually run out to the max tier. They are no longer looking for 100 million views. They're probably looking for something which is 100,000 views or 50,000 views. They are a small company. So offer them a lifetime deal or an annual deal instead of offering them a monthly deal, because they might not be able to afford it. But the number of times people are using this tool for 50,000 views is actually increasing, which means there's an audience which we are ignoring and leaving on the table. Right? So hopefully that helps.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. I think let's jump into some questions that I've been receiving from multiple streams. So Prashant Thakkar asks, building an audience, he's picking up on your point about build an audience before you build a product, right? So building a product takes time. Won't my audience lose the interest meanwhile, while I build the product?
So it depends on how much time, right? So building a product, once you know whom you're building it for and what are the features that they're sorely lacking, and this is where I tell my students as well in my courses that it's not just interesting enough for you to understand how to prioritize features, but also understand which benefits are you offering,
what value are you going to create early enough.
Right. And a lot of people are still awakening to the jobs to be done methodology of being able to build a product that just solve for one job that your customer is trying to use your product for, and then be able to build upon it.
Absolutely. So, I think the product management community, in my view, has done a disservice by creating one very confusing acronym called MVP, right? And it's, if truly understood, the spirit of MVP is, if your organization, if your team, you built around experiments and MVPs, the time that you're talking about the product is done is actually not long. It's incremental and iterative, right? So the time that you build the audience versus you start delivering an incremental value to your customers is actually short. And series, right? So this is where a lot of folks think, oh, product means it has to wait for 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, or whatever, and my audience is going to go away, right? But great question. I think this is something that certainly Prashant has thought about and asked a very good point.
Right. And to Prashant's point, sorry to interrupt you, Sai, but to
No,
Prashant's point, I think once you clearly understand what your audience or customer is looking for, hopefully the time to build that product is not too long enough for you to service that need, right? And if the need is so sore and underserved, the customer is going to wait for you unless somebody else actually builds a better product than that need, right? So then you're definitely going to lose that customer. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So Tanvista, I hope I'm pronouncing a name right. Saying I'm someone who's part of productizing process, slowly transitioning into product marketing. I create product blogs for release updates, feature announcements, case studies. How do I start with the market research around these deliverables? Now, I'm not sure if the last part of the question is phrased accurately, but I'm going to presume that how am I going to actually leverage any of these things as part of creating that interest in the customers?
Sure. So tools like Sparktor are going to give you a great starting point on where your audience is hanging out. But once you're into those communities, into those podcasts, Slack channels, you will actually understand what are people talking about and what are people mostly whining or complaining about. Hey, this particular product does not serve my need at all, right? And you would be actually better served in being able to listen into those conversations. And once you have created a piece of content, like a product blog topic that you told, it would be good to put it back into the forum and ask them, hey, could you actually provide feedback on whether this is relevant for you? And most oftentimes it usually is. A lot of underserved product needs are usually met in the most unlikeliest of subreddits. So feel free to go through subreddits. I know it's a rabbit hole, right? So choose your time wisely on how much you choose to explore Reddit for. But you'll find a lot of subreddits actually engage actively on products that they are testing out. And for that matter, product management and product marketing has a lot of useful subreddits which you could listen into and then write blogs which will serve that need. I hope that helps.
That's a absolutely nice tip, I think, for a lot of people. Reddit is not something comes to first to mind when you think about product management, but I'm sure there are so many subreddits under that, right?
Big disclaimer though on subreddits, they're not going to allow you to shamelessly promote upfront. Learn to give first before you decide to plug your product. Otherwise, they are going to block you. Needless to say.
I'm glad they do that. Otherwise, we would be still, circling around the promotions.
Absolutely.
Good. So one last question in the interest of time. And so Bhuvan Jain asks, do you think if messaging or positioning and messaging, if they are done right, is it a sure shot way of crossing the chasm?
Is it a sure shot way of crossing the chasm? Only time will tell, because what I understand by crossing the chasm is to be able to get a latent audience for making sure that there is definitely enough people to serve this need that my product is serving, right? And I don't know for a fact, because what matters to your first 100 customers might not really work well for the next 50,000.
I think that's the important part, right? You have a customer life cycle, just like a product life cycle. You have a customer life cycle. I think he's referring to Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm part of it, right? So you have the early adopters, and obviously there is a chasm before you get to early majority. I think the lesson from there clearly is what works for the early adopters may not work for the early majority. So your positioning and messaging, and of course the value that you're creating to the product from the product has to be different, right? And evolve over a period of time. Super. So if you were to pick any of the questions that you thought was, great, with the questions that we asked, feel free to go ahead. But meanwhile, Shama, if you can bring up the slides, and we can announce the best question. What do you think, Ranga?
I think Bhuvan's question was really relevant because a lot of people think that if we get that right, hopefully, it's like a build it and you will come kind of metaphor, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen so.
Congratulations, Bhuvan. You will receive the information how to get access to your free digital learning course very soon. And can you move to the next slide, please?
And just one thing while we move on to the next slide, Sai, is that a lot of people think that it's going to be very few and far between that you get to listen about positioning and messaging from PMM leaders. So I personally learn every day. I'm by no means an expert. I learned from this forum called Sharebird, SHAREBIRD. What Sharebird does is it hosts Ask Me Anything sessions, AMA sessions with PMM leaders. But the good part about it is all AMAs are stored in a blog. So even if you miss the session, even if you have wanted to listen to an AMA from the PM of Airbnb, you will see that on Sharebird's site. Great. And feel free to go through that at your own pace.
Great, awesome. Just like all these sessions will be available forever for people to go and watch, and also blogs, right? People can read and consume it at any time. Thank you so much, Renga. Appreciate your time, in sharing your insights and also interesting tools that you have been using so that folks can benefit from it. Here's a small token of appreciation from the Institute of Product Leadership. And by the way, this certificate is now on the blockchain, immutable, automatically verifiable, the world's first Web 3.0 platform, the partners that we talked about, Hyperstack. So for the last few editions, we've been providing this as a digital certificate, but I think now it's credentialed, right? So feel free to share it wherever you want to share it, right? And it's there forever.
Thank you.
Right? And thank you so much, folks. For those of you joining, don't forget to tune in tomorrow. And more importantly, if you benefited from these sessions, if you found them useful, please leave a couple of lines of review on Google and Quora and help other people join the community, right? So, this forum grew from a handful of people to thousands just by word of mouth and people telling others how useful and beneficial it is, right? So super, and over to you, Shama. And thank you all, and good night, right? So
thank you so much for joining in. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for
Super.
the opportunity.
Thank you, Renga, and thank you, Sai, for that brilliant discussion. And I'm sure the audience also resonates with what I feel. We have learned a great deal through this session. Amazing discussion. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Audience, before we leave, just wanted to make a mention about the community here. So one of the main purposes of hosting and conducting the Product Leadership Festival is to build and nurture a product community in this country. There is already a very strong community of 2,000 plus members, where a lot of content is being shared by product managers and CXOs, sharing their learnings and insights. So scan the QR code on the screen to be a part of that community and help us grow.
Thank you. And for everyone who had a question, but I couldn't get to it in due time, please feel free to ask me that on LinkedIn. I would definitely be able to answer you over there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Ranga. I was going to mention that I'm sure there are several questions that people have asked and we couldn't pick up here. But if you find some time, it'll be great, I think, to answer that.
Thank you.